April 11, 2025, South Carolina carried out one of the most controversial executions in modern U.S. history, the firing squad death of Mikal Deen Mahdi. For 2 decades, Mahdi's name was tied to one of the most brutal murders in South Carolina's history, the killing of Captain James Myers, an off-duty officer whose violent end shocked the entire state. But what unfolded inside the execution chamber on that April evening was unlike anything the public expected. What was promised to be a swift and humane execution instead turned into a chilling spectacle that witnesses still describe as a botched firing squad. And tonight, we take you inside Mahdi's last 24 hours, his final meal, the execution chamber, and the autopsy that revealed disturbing truths South Carolina never wanted exposed. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will force you to question whether this was justice served, or cruel and unusual punishment carried out in the name of law. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this story, and comment your thoughts below. Do you believe the firing squad was justice or torture? Because as we step into the crime that sealed Mikal Deen Mahdi's fate, what you'll hear will shake you to the core. In 2004, South Carolina faced one of the darkest crimes in its modern history. Mikal Deen Mahdi, then just 21 years old, crossed a line so brutal that it shook law enforcement and civilians alike to their core. The victim was not a stranger, not a random civilian. It was Captain James Myers, an off-duty Orangeburg public safety officer known for his dedication to his community. That spring evening, Myers was ambushed, shot 8 to 9 times, some bullets tearing through his head, others through his body. He never had a chance to fight back. The crime did not stop there. Mahdi, determined to erase evidence, doused Myers' body and set it on fire. A man who had served and protected the public was reduced to ashes in an act of merciless violence. As the flames consumed Captain Myers' body, Mahdi fled the scene in the officer's own patrol vehicle. It was a final act of defiance that triggered a statewide manhunt and left Myers' family and fellow officers in unimaginable grief. News of the killing spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves far beyond Orangeburg. Authorities launched an intensive investigation, and it did not take long for the hunt to end. Mahdi was captured in Florida, extradited back to South Carolina, and faced a courtroom that would decide his fate. The evidence was overwhelming, the brutality undeniable, and the verdict inevitable. Mahdi was guilty. The jury handed down the harshest penalty available, the death sentence. For more than 2 decades, that sentence hung over South Carolina like a storm cloud, waiting for the moment it would finally strike. The name Mikal Mahdi became a grim reminder of violence, loss, and the weight of justice delayed. But when April 11, 2025 finally arrived, the punishment for Captain Myers' murder would not just be remembered for its finality. It would instead be remembered for the method Mahdi chose to die, and the disturbing questions that method left behind. Because when the time came, Mikal Deen Mahdi was forced to make a decision no prisoner ever wants to make. Which form of death would he choose? And why would that decision ignite one of the most heated debates in America about punishment, justice, and humanity? Under South Carolina law, condemned inmates are forced to choose how they will die. The options are as grim as they are controversial: lethal injection, the electric chair, or the firing squad. Each carries a reputation soaked in pain, history, and controversy. Lethal injection, once the primary method, had become synonymous with botched executions and lingering deaths. Drug shortages and secret drug sourcing left many inmates writhing in agony for minutes, sometimes longer, as their bodies fought against the chemicals. The electric chair, once the state's main method of execution, carried its own horrors. Witnesses in past executions recalled seeing flames, smoke, and the smell of burning flesh as condemned men convulsed violently in their final moments. Faced with these 2 grim options, Mahdi made his decision on March 28, 2025. He rejected lethal injection, fearing the possibility of prolonged suffering. He refused the electric chair, knowing its legacy of fire and pain. Instead, he signed the official documents choosing death by firing squad. The decision stunned the public. South Carolina had never carried out a modern firing squad execution before, and suddenly Mahdi's name was attached to a historic moment. Legal experts, activists, and victims' families all weighed in. Was his choice an act of desperation, defiance, or cold calculation? Nationwide, the firing squad sparked fiery debate about cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. But while the nation debated, Mahdi's clock was running out. His choice was final. His execution date was set, and nothing could stop the countdown. The question now was simple yet terrifying. What happens to a man in the last 24 hours before the end? What did Mikal Mahdi say and do in those final moments as every appeal, every plea, and every last chance at life was ripped away from him? On April 10th, 2025, Mahdi's final full day alive began behind the cold walls of a South Carolina prison. As tradition allowed, he was granted the right to request a last meal. His choices were indulgent and heavy: ribeye steak cooked medium, mushroom risotto, broccoli, collard greens, a slice of cheesecake, and sweet tea. But no meal, no matter how rich, could mask the reality of what was coming. With every bite, Mahdi knew he was tasting not food, but the ticking of the clock winding down toward his death. Outside his cell, his attorneys were making frantic moves. They filed last-minute appeals, arguing that his trial had been marred by ineffective counsel. They pointed to a history of childhood trauma and mental health struggles that had never been fully presented to the jury. Their argument was clear. If the jury had heard the whole truth, maybe Mahdi would not be facing death. But one by one, the doors closed. The South Carolina Supreme Court rejected his appeal. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to intervene. And Governor Henry McMaster, holding the power of clemency, denied the final request for mercy. By the early hours of April 11th, Mahdi's fate was sealed. His final appeals lay in tatters, his legal lifelines cut. He was left with nothing but silence, the echo of guards outside his cell, and the unrelenting knowledge that by 6 p.m. his life would end. At 5:30 p.m., officers escorted him from his cell to the execution chamber. Every step he took was one closer to death, steps no man could take back. And inside that chamber, the world will watch history unfold in a way that no one was prepared for. Because at exactly 6:01 p.m., the curtain rose. The rifles were raised, and what witnesses saw next would forever redefine South Carolina's claim of a humane execution. At 6:01 p.m., the execution chamber curtain opened. Witnesses sat frozen as Mikal Deen Mahdi was strapped to a solid wooden chair. His arms and legs were bound tightly, leaving him no ability to move. A blanket was pulled over his head, erasing his face from view, and a white cloth target was pinned directly over his heart. Behind a wall stood 3 marksmen, anonymous executioners with rifles raised. Each was instructed to aim at the target. Only 2 rifles carried live ammunition, while the third held a blank, so that no shooter would know for certain if they had fired the fatal shot. The chamber fell silent. A command rang out, and with a thunderous crack, 3 shots echoed through the room, slamming into Mahdi's chest. For an instant, it seemed over, but then the silence broke. Witnesses reported hearing groans from behind the hood. Mahdi's body twitched, his chest heaved, and shallow breaths rattled from his lungs. What was promised as an instant, humane death had become a drawn-out display of pain. Doctors declared him dead at 6:05 p.m., for minutes after the rifles fired. But those minutes felt like an eternity for the man strapped to the chair, and for the witnesses who could not look away. The state declared the execution success. But when the autopsy report was released, the horrifying truth emerged. Because Mahdi's heart, the one organ the firing squad was supposed to destroy, was never hit, and what the bullets did strike revealed a terrifying failure of the system itself. Officials told the public that the firing squad worked exactly as designed, fast, certain, and painless. But the autopsy painted a far different picture. The bullets had missed Mahdi's heart entirely. Instead, they tore through his liver, pancreas, and lung, organs that can prolong life and suffering rather than end it quickly. This meant Mahdi was not instantly unconscious. He was alive, He was aware, and he was suffering. Independent experts, including pathologist Dr. Jonathan Arden, confirmed what witnesses had suspected. Mahdi likely remained conscious for 30 to 60 seconds after the shots. He may have felt the crushing pain of bullets tearing through his body. He may have heard the rifles. He may have known, in those final gasps, that even his death had gone wrong. Defense lawyers called it a massive botch. They pointed to missing x-rays, incomplete photographs, and inconsistent reporting by state officials as proof of a cover-up, instead of the clean, quick execution South Carolina promised. Mahdi's death became a national scandal. The state had defended the firing squad as a constitutional, humane, and efficient method of execution. But Mahdi's autopsy left behind an image of cruelty, suffering, and unanswered questions. To this day, the haunting vision remains. A man strapped to a chair, crying out his last breath, his death stretching longer than it ever should have. And so, the debate continues. Was this justice truly served, or was it cruel and unusual punishment disguised as law? I want to hear your thoughts. Was the firing squad execution a Mikal Deen Mahdi justice, or was it torture? Comment below, subscribe, like, and share this story, because the truth about this execution will echo far beyond April 11th, 2025.